This heart of a lion, this soul of a titan. You won't break me, you won't break me. This force, you can't fight it. This thunder and lightning. You won't break me, you won't break me.
Welcome back to the Volvo Ocean Race here at race headquarters in Alicante. We have seen 3 of the boats complete leg 2, the 7,000-mile brutal, relentless racing from Lisbon down to Cape Town. Now it is the turn of the Volvo Ocean Race veteran Bauer Backing. He is back now for his 8th try at winning the title, and he's only about a mile away from the finish line here. We've seen some pretty difficult challenges for all of the teams getting in. I mean, really, Mafre, the first boat, the boat to win the leg, got the easiest run in. Everybody afterwards has had a harder and harder time. And well, you can just get a half an impression from the yellow line, tacking into the finish here in Cape Town in the dark. It just doesn't quite stop for these teams. I mean, I'm hoping that they have been saving their energy and have been stacking on every single tack as we've been coming in here.
It's quite possible that they've split the tack on those last ones. You know, they're not under threat from behind. They can't do anything to get the guys in front because they're already in the restaurants in Cape Town. So, you know, I hope I hope that Bauer Backing has been merciful for his crew. And actually, it's not actually an advantage to be stacking so rigorously at the moment because it's so fluky, you know, you could end up with the boat on top of you.
Well, I think it's interesting you mentioned that because I believe that is actually something that happened just a few moments ago. If you haven't already, if you sign up to the Race Experts Twitter feed, they keep you up to date minute by minute, hour by hour with everything that's been happening out there. And they have access to all the data that comes off the boats. And just looking at some of the heel data on board Team Brunel, I mean, it went from 40 degrees of heel to 5 degrees of heel on top of them.
The other way, exactly. This is the Geek Squad right here inside Volvo Ocean Race. So if you want the inside, unvarnished, non-comsy roll at what a race around the world looks like, sign up for that Twitter.
But right now, Team Brunel managing to make just a little over 11 knots towards the finish line. And this is the virtual eye view at the moment. We can't fly the helicopter right now because unfortunately it is after sunset. But just before Team Brunel crosses the finish line, let's take a look at some of the highlights from the Dutch team here in leg 2.
Most important thing, of course, is keep the team together.
Throw the jeep, throw the jeep, throw the jeep, throw the jeep.
Have a lot of talks.
Don't go left again, so I'm having to keep pace.
Talk about the strategy. Talk about the weather.
There's definitely times when we're on deck that I would rather be anywhere else, you know, than on this boat, and I just hate it. But yeah, there's a lot of times that I just love it, and you know, you have that mix of emotions with the race and the sailing.
The water doesn't stop coming over the deck, so you're always wet and you're always cold. There's no end to it.
We've got the best man in the world on that, for as far as I know now. The world's best sailor is working on it.
One, and hold!
Well, there was the highlights from leg 2 on Team Brunel. It's been pretty tough for all of the teams, all of the sailors. That incredible start at the top with an incredible breeze sailing out of Lisbon. The doldrums didn't really rattle the cages at all. The speeds were incredibly high. So in fact, we're actually finishing here slightly ahead of schedule, but 3 of the teams have struggled here.
Well, they've They fell off the front in the middle of that first Southern Ocean depression. That was the sleigh ride that everybody was waiting for, and that's what whisked them all the way from the Brazilian coast almost to Cape Town right now. Just one little jibe there for the leaders towards the end, and then this crazy extension of play for the three boats at the back. They slid off the back of that front and then got swamped by the lighter winds behind it. So this is, as is often the case in yacht racing, if you can get your nose out in front of everybody else, then you're going to get more favourable conditions.
And one thing here with Team Brunel being in that front four, staying ahead of that pack that's developed at the back, I think it's important to remember how poorly leg one went for the Dutch team. So even though this is arguably not really the result that Bauer-Becking and the fans of Team Brunel would have wanted, it's remarkable actually that they've managed to correct so many of the speed problems that we did see in between Alicante and Lisbon on leg one.
Well, that's right. They were blazing on this leg, weren't they? You remember the Dongfeng race team were basically dominating this leg out in front, but then there was this really compact pack with Mafre, with Vestas 11th Hour Racing, with Team Brunel, and they were all sort of circulating in there, all in contact week after week after week. And so really, I feel like this fourth place is not really an accurate representation of the level that we're expecting from Brunel, and also what we've seen over the last couple of weeks when they've been sailing on the open sea.
And of course, I mean, it's a close finish, but we've expected it to be closer. I mean, this is one thing that's remarkable about the one design nature of the Volvo Ocean 65 with Team Brunel just about to come across the finish line. It is remarkably close out there, and actually, just a few days ago, they were almost on the heels of the boats in front. So for fans of Team Brunel, if you're a little bit disappointed that this boat is just falling short of a podium finish, there's every reason here to be optimistic. Bauer-Becking certainly has made a big improvement in the performance of this team from what we've seen in the past. And right now, as you were watching on the virtual eye, 11.8, 11.7 knots as they're coming across the finish line. We're expecting them to cross the finish line momentarily. In fact, they're so close that I can't quite zoom in tight enough on the tracker to measure their distance. But this is the best opportunity that we have from the virtual eye to see exactly where they are. The far end of the finish line. And that, to me, looks like they've come through the finish line. We are trying to bring you some pictures from out on the water, but right now it is pretty much pitch black. But once the team cross the finish line, they'll get themselves packed away and then make their sails into harbour. So now, celebrations on board Team Brunel as they come through the finish line. And we're just going to wait to hear from the sailors themselves. And it will be very interesting to see how someone like Bauer-Becking thinks about a very strong fourth place finish.
Well, I think I've figured it out, Niall. If you look at the tracker there, it looks like their boat is half underwater. So maybe they've got too much water ballast on board and they're sinking. No, anyway, sorry, bad joke. But anyway, it was actually really impressive earlier today. Some of you that have just tuned in may not have seen the images from the earlier arrivals, and there was significant swell out there. And that's one of the things that has really complicated the arrivals into the start line, is the fact that as the wind drops off in the lee of the mountain, you've got no wind, but the waves are still there. And that's what's been driving these boats round and crazy, and probably driving the navigators on board completely crazy as well, because it's really hard just to keep the boat moving.
Well, we're going to try and bring you some live images from on the water at the moment. The connection isn't as best as what we'd like because we happen to have a little bit further off the shore to get to the finish line where Team Brunel is. But as soon as we've got those images, we're going to bring them to you here. What we're watching at the moment is the virtual eye tracker as Team Brunel have been sailing in here. Important to remember that even though it feels like quite a while ago, 2 hours maybe it was since Vestas 11th Hour Racing have crossed the finish line, Team Brunel very much part of that front four and only losing out in terms of miles in the last day and a half, not really falling onto that back pack that we saw with the final three boats that will be in, 24 hours behind. So these are little splits that we're seeing here. We do have one major split in the fleet.
Yeah, we certainly do. And in that backpack, we'll talk about it later, but now, just to drive home Niall's point, that we've got three boats all basically stuck one on each other's tail. There is 2.9 miles between Action Nobel and Sunken Kai, with Turn the Tide on Plastic sandwiched right in the middle. So 1 mile, if you imagine Turn the Tide on Plastic in the middle, 1.2 miles forward to Action Nobel, and 1.75 miles back to Sunken Kai Scallywag, taking up the rear position there. So as you said, they've still got about 24 hours of sailing, or 330 miles to go, and we look forward to welcoming them again tomorrow. But in the meantime, we've got Brunel.
Well, we've got Brunel coming in, but what I actually want to do now, Conrad, because, you know, Bauerbecking and his crew, they've crossed the finish line. We know that they're getting the boat now into the harbour. We've got a couple of minutes here, so I just want to take a look at the tactical situation over leg 2 that's led us into this position. Let's take a look at, well, just before we do, actually, we're just getting a little treat. These are live images from the finish line, from off the water, as Team Brunel makes their way in. We've got a crew out there. They are ready to catch the sailors. But let's take a look at the tactical analysis from leg 2 and wind back the virtual eye and have a look at how the leg played out. Well, it was a pretty tight and ferocious start, wasn't it, all the way back in Lisbon? I mean, 30 knots and straight into it.
Straight into it. They came blazing out of the river at 30, 35 knots, and boat speeds almost the same as well. And so it was a really tough start to the leg. And the game early on was how to get west and how to get around the top of Madeira.
And one thing that we did see, I mean, we were talking about this earlier here in the studio, jibing on this leg, more than what we've seen on leg 1, really became a factor. How quickly you could jibe and how aggressively you could play those tiny little shifts. And as we made our way down, still in the Northern Hemisphere, it was all about, could you take those little advantages off the clouds, off the wind shifts, and 1 or 2 boats coming out to the front. Dongfeng race team, Mafre really standing out strong.
Well, that's right. The skipper and navigators were merciless on board, driving their crew incredibly hard. We saw Sunken Kai Scallywag struggling a little bit in the beginning of this leg because, well, they're short-handed, understaffed. They've got less people on board. And if you look at their route right now, look at the red one, and you can see so many more sharp corners, so many more jibes in comparison to the grey one, which is pretty smooth, and they're really limiting the maneuvers. And I think they were pretty tired after that tough introduction. But you saw even Volvo race veterans with bloodshot eyes and salt caking their faces all the way down into the doldrums. Didn't really get a slowdown there at all. One of the best doldrums crossing that I've ever seen in my life as an offshore sailor. And then this was the crucial moment here.
Well, this was the moment for Dongfeng race team, really, when they sort of threw it away. We did speak to Charles Cordrellia and some of the other crew, and they finished. This moment here, where they jibed late compared to the rest of the fleet, sailing a little bit closer to the centre of the St. Helena High, caused them irreparable speed loss. And there you can just see, when they jibed back, Mafre, Vestas 11th Hour Racing and Team Brunel all sailing in front of them. Credit where credit's due, the French team did manage to get themselves back in. But at this point right here, Team Brunel certainly in the hunt for second place. I mean, it's important to remember, even though they're finishing 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 behind the winner, they were in the hunt all the way.
Absolutely, really, really strong position. And the speed struggles that we talked about in leg 1 were clearly resolved. They were right up there with the leaders. As to what caused them to fall back behind, well, it's going to be interesting to talk with Bauerbecking, and perhaps, if we're lucky, the somewhat taciturn navigator Andrew Cape, and try and get a little bit of a sneak view into what exactly happened there.
Well, it was an incredibly interesting leg, and now we can see the boat coming into the harbour. These are live images from the dockside. We've been waiting to see the crew on board, and just in a few moments, hopefully, we're going to be able to speak to the sailors themselves. And it's been amazingly interesting seeing the contrast as we touch in with the sailors all the way through the legs. Occasionally, we get a chance to sort of speak to them over the satellite link, and you can see some days happy, sad, more energy, other days tired. But the relief that we've seen on the faces of these sailors when they get to Cape Town, it has been clear.
So much backslapping and a few whoops of joy as they've gone across the line. And it's this incredible release, as you say, the satisfaction of a job well done. joy and all of those emotions you've kept bottled up, playing those cards close to your chest through the entire leg. That's when it finally comes and it becomes real. That they've, the first three boats made the podium. They've done a great job. These guys have too, and I think that we've seen great potential for the rest of the race.
Well, Team Brunel now dropping their sails, getting themselves ready to come into the dock. Alberto Bolzan, the watch leader, just helping with the foot of the main at the moment, just getting everything down. I mean, we mentioned this before, didn't we? But it's almost a slightly cruel aspect of our sport. If you're a sailor yourself, you'll know this. It doesn't matter whether you're a professional offshore athlete or whether you just sail a dinghy. When you finish the race, the packing up of the boat when you're tired, cold, and hungry, that's always the worst part.
Well, to put no finer point on it, there is the race to the finish line, and then there is often either the race to the pontoon or the race to the dinghy lift. And there's just so much faffing around. We have a mechanical sport, so you need to look after the boat as well as the man and the machine. And this is what they're doing now.
Well, here comes Team Brunel with the main down, get themselves into the dock. And on the dock, waiting for them, is Amy Monkman. And right now, she is there with the Team Brunel shore crew.
Hi there, thanks Niall. Yes, I'm here with EJ, who's shore crew engineer for Team Brunel. EJ, we can just see your team are about to come in behind us, but just quickly, tell us what the highs and lows of that leg were for you as a shore team shore team member.
Highs for me as a shore team member would be perfectly well. The start was very exciting when we saw them leave in Lisbon there, and following them every moment at the ebb that we had on the Volvo Ocean Race. It was really the switching it every time that they had from crossing the Atlantic and then coming back again. Of course, this time when we saw some very tactical movings there, and we were very curious on what all the thinkings was on the other boats. The moments of the jibe coming back over here, if they would work out or not, so very exciting there. And then again, it wasn't over at that point. It was still coming along this way with several different highs and lows on the wind pressure that we had. So that was still very exciting, everything. Every moment it could change, so we're still tracking everything and following everything all the way down here. It's just the last few hours.
When we last interviewed one of your shore team members in Lisbon, he said that you weren't really particularly happy with the result that you guys got, and you were really hoping for something better. Fourth place is better than what happened in Lisbon. So how are the team feeling as a whole?
This is climbing up the ladder, that's good. And we saw some very good moves for the team, and I think we should be very happy with a result like this. They had a tough leg, this one. This one's pretty tough, especially the beginning. There's a couple of guys starting on here with the long races, and they had their first one now, so they would be really knowing now what happened, and really heads off for these guys now, and they're really curious what their stories will be once they arrive in a few.
Well, we spoke to Dongfeng race team manager Bruno Dubois, and he said that actually his team and he himself considered this leg to be one of the toughest. Do you think your team would say the same?
I think if you ask the experts on the world, especially Bauer, then he might say there's another leg that could be more rough than this one. But I think that especially the beginning, as I said, the beginning of this one was pretty similar to pretty rough weathers that you can have if you go to take the South Cape. But no, especially the beginning of this one, and also being a pretty long one, is it's pretty similar. Yeah.
And what's interesting about your team is that you have a wealth of sort of sailing knowledge on board, but it's not all offshore. So just tell us a little bit about how the newer members of the team, who are kind of newcomers to offshore sailing, have found this leg, because you'll have the inside knowledge that we just won't have.
Well, you have some of the inside knowledge. They probably need a haircut now. You saw something of that maybe on the apps and on telly. No, there's a good mix on the boat, about a lot of experience on these legs, on these long distance racings, but also on the shorter terms or the shorter racing, and that all mixed up to this leg. That for the first time that all mixed up now. Everything in front of this one was pretty short, pretty more inshore racing that they did, and this was a really long leg, and they now really know what Volvo Ocean Racing is.
Well, we'll let you get back to your team, but just quickly before we do, can we just ask you one quick note, some quick sentences on how you think that Team Brunel will do in the next leg, which is also a Southern Ocean leg?
A lot of knowledge was gained now, and also a lot of knowledge was now transferred from the more experienced guys to the guys that just stepped on the boat. So we'll be seeing those guys climbing up, and we're waiting for it.
All right, thank you, EJ. We'll let you get back to your team. Back to you now.
Oh, thanks, Amy. That was Amy Monkman there on the dock. She's waiting for the crew to get in. And Conrad, just give us a little bit of an inside knowledge here. If we're not too used to some of these kind of offshore boats with the square head and everything on the mainsail, it's not that easy to drop the main, is it?
Well, strangely not. First of all, we need to know that the halyard, for those of you that don't sail, there's the bit of string that holds the mainsail up the mast. It's a 2-to-1, so it holds the tension or divides the tension in two, but it's not actually that holds it up. It is locked with a mechanical metal-on-metal connection into the mast track, and so you've got a halyard lock. And then the thing that they're sort of farting about with at the moment is getting off the first angular batten. So it's called the gaff batten. That's the one that goes up and that actually projects out that top corner. And so it's the stiffest batten in the whole mainsail, even though it is the shortest one. And then what you require with the person, maybe it's kind of hard to see, but these sailors are wearing Dubarry boots that have reflective stripes around the boot. So if you can see those sort of reflective flashes there, a little bit up the mast, that's the bowman. So they're wearing a climbing harness, and they've been hoisted a little bit up the mast, and they've got a set of the little toolkit, and you have to unscrew the top corner of the sail where it has a metal connection that goes into the car slider. So it's there disconnecting the battens, you can see. So he's doing the second to last one, going down, off comes the gaff batten, and then only then do you have access to the top of the sail. So it is quite a complicated procedure, particularly because all of these sails are fully battened, and so I think they've got about 7 full battens and one half on the leech all the way down on the bottom. The reason that they have that is that it creates a more rigid structure. It prolongs the life of the sail because you've got long battens, and it reduces flutter. So that's how you can get one sail all the way around the world.
And we really are saying one sail all the way around the world. The sailors here have to protect this equipment, and it is going through hell out on the ocean every day. Either it's UV damage or it's hard work, wind and waves. And not only the equipment, but the sailors themselves as well. I mean, if you have any doubt that the Volvo Ocean Race is the toughest test of a team in professional sport, just check this out.
It just goes on and on. It's relentless.
Feeling pretty dehydrated.
You're tired and you're cold, you don't really want to drink anything.
There's no point in a day like today where you could stand up without holding on to something, you know. It's like someone's come to your house and just turn you on a 30-degree tilt, and we're still trying to make hot food and go to the loo and all the other bits and pieces that you do at home, you know. Even staying stationary here takes some effort, so it just adds to the physical part of the day and, you know, the lack of sleep and everything.
Bloody hard this race. And the opposition are bloody good.
We had the equal worst run, and we've just been losing miles, bleeding miles ever since.
We're getting our head kicked in, skid after skid, and not really being able to fix it or not exactly knowing what's wrong. So it's a bit of a new experience for us all. But just got to keep trying, mate. You know, becoming a little bit embarrassing.
It's obviously hard to not get caught up in the emotion of winning and losing.
Sometimes you're a little bit pissed off, but if you keep things to an average, you save a lot of energy for yourself as well, and you're probably, you know, most effective.
Yeah, eat, sleep, sail.
With the positions changing so much, like it is really hard to stay fully onto it when you make some mistakes and you take a loss. In this race above all, you just got to hang in there. There'll be opportunities as long as we're there in good shape at that time for the next opportunity. But it is tough when you're not putting it all together the way you want to.
Well, it's been an incredibly tough start to this edition of the Volvo Ocean Race. We are 2 legs down, at least for most of the fleet right now. We still have 3 boats out there waiting to finish leg 2. A good few miles left for them, but Team Brunel, with the race veteran Bauer Becking on board, has crossed the finish line. And, I mean, this is somebody that I have heard Bauer Becking talk about giving up the Volvo Ocean Race. Oh, I'll just do it one more time. That's all I really need to do. And he just keeps coming back. Is it because this is somebody that has been on the podium 5 times? I mean, he's got 3 seconds, 2/3 in his CV so far. Never won. That's got to eat you up.
Absolutely. Well, you know, working for the Volvo Ocean Race, we've got Richard Mason working for us at the moment, and he said, what, he did the race 5 times and he never won it either. And yeah, that's tough in the life of a competitor. And you know that these guys are relentless with their crew, with their boat, but primarily with themselves. You know, they were so driven as individuals. Either that, or he doesn't like living at home or on land. But it's really incredible. 3 times second place, and well, not the best start to the race, but as we just heard from the shore crew member, they're on the ladder and they're going up.
And I think, you know, I don't want to. It's difficult to criticise such a strong lineup that we see on Team Brunel, because we have got some big names, not just in offshore sailing, but in sailing in general. But I think it's interesting that a 2nd place in the last edition for Bauer Becking, and then he pretty much changed 90% of his crew. We've got Andrew Kate back on board. Everybody else is fresh.
Well, yeah, you know, he was one of the later campaigns to announce their participation. You know, apparently Brunel was keen to come back, but maybe not immediately. Finally, they pushed the button on the campaign. They said, "Okay, let's go." And then I think it was pretty much a case of looking around and seeing who was available, and all of the veterans had been soaked up by the earlier teams. And so he benefited from the experience, from the fact that the America's Cup had just come to an end. During this summer in Bermuda, Bauer Becking, who is the tactician on board one of the J boats, he was over there, and so maybe he had his scouting eyes on and looking for talent that might be available. And I'm sure that with the America's Cup returning to monohulls, I'm pretty sure that Grant Dalton was pretty keen on placing his cyclors, his skippers, his tacticians like Blair Turk and Peter Berlin, and don't forget Carlo Hoosman, who was a cycler on board Emirates Team New Zealand, but shares his nationality between New Zealand and the Netherlands. So he's on board, and then maybe he'll come back to New Zealand when the Cup kicks off again.
And those Cup sailors, I mean, have certainly had some pretty tough times here coming into offshore sailing, because we did see some really serious initiation ceremonies. As tradition stands, King Neptune came and visited the fresh sailors coming into the Volvo Ocean Race, the first time that they crossed the equator. And if you missed some of the action out there, have a little look at this.
Crossing the equator.
Probably pretty firm for being this wide.
I'm not sure when. Maybe I don't want to know when.
Everyone hold! Where are they? People!
Good morning, Matt Gray. Welcome to the equator.
The time has come.
To the rescue!
Well, everyone, welcome to the equator crossing ceremony. We will begin with a list of crimes. If any resistance is given, severe punishment will result.
Get off the wheel! I must say... What are these? Nice. Whoa!
We think he needs a bit of a makeover.
Beauty.
It's only once in your life.
The side. Ah, damn.
Okay, take this one.
Here you come, Taylor.
And we're very fortunate a few hours ago to be attacked by a school of flying fish, so there's a few fish have made it into the bucket as well.
Oh, oh yeah.
That was really fun.
Oh, no way!
You have to clear it. That would have been tight.
Obviously, I've given a little bit of hair away as an offering, which is good to have my first equator crossing under the belt, for sure.
Yes! Good work, everybody.
I'm glad I'm in a club, or whatever it is.
Well, if you were watching the second half of leg 2 and you were wondering just why it was that some of the sailors were sporting some unusual haircuts, there you go. That's the idea there. And Conrad, I mean, it was interesting speaking to some of the young sailors before the leg started and asking them, oh, what are you most scared of in the Volvo Ocean Race? And one or two of them did say, you know, the equator actually is really weighing heavily on my mind.
Yeah, well, why do they do that? Well, haircuts with racing stripes makes the boat go faster. All right, well, fair enough. I will actually explain that. It is a tradition that dates back more than 400 years in the British Royal Navy. It was a ceremony that allowed the enlisted crew to sort of rise up and mock protest against the officers, and then the following day, when they crossed the equator, it was the officers that came back and apparently covered their poor crew in food slops, rubbed their bellies with grease, shaved them with a rusty razor, filled their mouths full of paint. These were the old school ways of initiating people into the Southern Hemisphere. Although it's funny that the new sailors were actually more afraid of the equator than they were of the Southern Ocean, because back in the day, it was the Southern Ocean that was really coming for you, and so being beaten up by a hefty-chested bosun was probably a pretty good initiation for what lay later in the Southern Ocean.
But I'm sure so many of them are going to be very happy to have that little moment behind them. But now Team Brunel are just making their way into the dock. But before they get there, Amy Monkman, our reporter down on the dockside, is with race director Phil Lawrence. Let's hear what they've got to say.
Thanks, Nell. So, Phil, we were just talking earlier with the shore team from Brunel, and they were telling us that this is obviously one of the toughest legs in the Volvo Ocean Race. In your opinion, would you say that's the case?
Well, I think so. It's a leg of several parts. You've got the North Atlantic, the doldrums, and then getting around the South Atlantic high. So plenty of challenges for the teams. I think the story of this leg is it's been pretty fast. The boats were launched out of Lisbon in a very strong northeasterly wind, very fast down to the equator, very easy doldrums crossing, more complicated in the South Atlantic, and just at the finish here, the leading four managed to get into here in Cape Town in perfect conditions, whereas the three remaining boats have got a very tough time getting in, may not be in until Sunday morning.
So those of us who work with you know that your least favourite question is, oh, Phil, what's the ETA? Just tell our audience a little bit about how you predict the expected time of arrival for a fleet like Volvo Ocean Race fleet in conditions as complex as you've just explained.
Well, it's quite a scientific process, really. We know the performance of the boats. We have very sophisticated weather models. We put those together and the computers generate routes. The sailors use the same thing when they're planning their tactics. And that gives us a good clue. We look back over history, maybe over 10 years, putting all those models together, and we get an ETA for the boats. So a year ago, when we were planning the route, we had an ETA which had a spread of 18 to 23 days for this leg. It's been a fast leg, and they're in 19 days.
I mean, what's really amazing, you talk about knowing the performance of the boats, and obviously they are all one design, but what's really amazing is that after thousands of miles, or, you know, a really, really, really long leg, and a tough leg, like you say, the last 3 boats are bunched together and they're separated. I mean, I haven't looked at the tracker recently, but they're separated by a matter of miles, if that. That's amazing.
It is. The boats are one design. They're absolutely identical. They're using the same weather models. They're using the same routing software, and they're using the same drive them together. I think the last group of boats are all covering each other now, trying to stay close to each other so they don't get dropped off the pack. So that does tend to drive them together. At the moment, they're 2 miles apart.
And can you predict the finishing stands for the last 3 boats?
Absolutely not. I never, as you know, I never predict the results.
Okay, all right, Phil, we'll let you get back to it. Thank you so much. All right, now it's back to you guys in the studio.
Well, thank you, Eamon. We're watching those back 3 boats that Phil Lawrence was talking about during that interview right now. That is their position at the moment coming into Cape Town. And, you know, Conrad, just explain to us briefly why it is that we're seeing such a split, yet such tight racing with this back 3.
Do you want me to give you the answer to the theory of the universe as well? That's yacht racing, my friend. You know, it's a tricky business. Basically, these kind of splits are created around that frontal zone, and so a front is a particular sector around a storm in the Southern Ocean, in the South Atlantic in this case, and it's a very sharp line that delineates wind that allows boats to go fast. So that's from the northwest sector, and then there's a really sharp shift in the wind. It sort of drops off. It gets quite squally and unstable, and then you've got wind blowing over a very established wave pattern set up. And so if you fall back a little bit behind the optimal place to be in that weather system, well, you just basically get pushed out the back. And it's kind of, it's painful to watch, really, because it's inexorable. It just sort of happens. There's nothing you can do about it. If you go back a little bit in the system or it catches you up, you just get spat out in the back. And that's what happened to these 3 boats. And then remember the stealth mode that Sunkenkai Scallywag tried, really. You know, they were able to turn off their tracker, make a break for it, get out of AIS range, which is what Phil Lawrence was just talking about. They made a clean break for it. They had a different strategy, and then the weather just pushed those last 3 boats back together, and then they are literally sailing within sight of each other, and I think that they're going to hang on to that all the way until Table Mountain.
Well, I think that's the offshoot from that is it's going to be an incredible arrivals for those final 3 boats. I mean, the position here with Team Brunel as well, Vestas 11th Hour Racing, Donfron Race Team, Mafre, it was pretty much set in stone the last 24 hours, if we can be fair. However, those back 3 is going to come down to the final few moments. But, I mean, it's going to be interesting for all of the race fans to see leg 2 conclude. It's going to be a relief for the friends and family on the dockside that we just saw a moment ago as Team Brunel are making now their final approach into the dock. There we can see some of the news crews interviewing some of the shore team down in Cape Town. If you're lucky enough to get yourself down to the race village, it opened today. It was a fast leg, but the race village opened in time for the boats to come down. We're going to have some import races, plenty of pro-ams, practice racing as well. And of course, the leg start, the next leg will be on the 10th of December. So it's not too long here for any of these teams really to rest and recharge.
Well, it's not only the teams, but the boats as well. I was talking about the fact that this is a mechanical sport. What happens here is they will rip the boats out of the water tomorrow. We were talking with Neil Cox earlier. He's the man that manages all of that. The boat team manager on his 4th or 5th Volvo Ocean race. And, well, what happens there? They're going to take the rigs out, they're going to take the boats out of the water, they're going to service everything, redo all of the winches, and they're going to get the electricians on board to make sure that all of the connections are still there, that the electrics on board haven't had a dose of the salt water that all of the sailors got in the face repeatedly for the past 19.5 days. And so it's really an opportunity for the boatyard staff to go through all of the 7 boats, top to tail, and make sure that they're ready for the rigors of the Southern Ocean. And this is particularly important because the next big service is in Auckland. So think about that. Think about just how many miles need to be done. They're going to sail from here to Melbourne. They've got 1 week, tiny pit stop there, and then they're back up into the Northern Hemisphere through the doldrums again. We'll be talking about the different style of monsoon doldrums that we have over the top of the Philippines. Up to Hong Kong, Guangzhou in China, back to Hong Kong, and then back to Auckland. So thousands of miles of sailing, and these boats need to be in absolutely impeccable condition by the time that they're leaving Cape Town. And Niall, as you were saying, these boats are not just here to get buffed and scrubbed. They've got 1 week out of the water, and then it's back in Pro-Am sailing, which is one of the specialities of the Volvo Ocean Race. It allows guests of the sponsors and guests of Volvo Ocean Race to sail on board the boat with the race crews to get a little bit of a taste of what life is like on board these crazy beasts.
And Cape Town is going to be a huge part of this race in more ways than one, because of course all that technical stuff, all the resting as well, but Cape Town holds a pretty special part in everybody's heart in the Volvo Ocean Race. It's certainly been a huge legacy built up over the years. And just as we wait for Team Brunel to hit the dock, Amy Monkman is down there at the moment with the local host from Cape Town, who maybe can tell us a little bit more as to why Cape Town is so special for sailing fans.
Thanks, Niall. Yes, that's exactly right. Cape Town's been a stopover out of 11 out of 13 editions of the Volvo Ocean Race, which is absolutely incredible. And I'm here with Jeff Aliff, who's also a big fan of the Volvo Ocean Race and our local MC down here. Jeff, just tell us, what is it that the people in Cape Town love about the Volvo Ocean Race?
Amy, I think the race has always had a very special part in the heart of Cape Townians. I mean, I think of my personal experience here. I moved here and got involved with it was originally the Whitbread, and I've certainly been involved with virtually every single Volvo Ocean Race. But sailing has got such a magic tradition in Cape Town, and it's a sport that's loved by Cape Townians all over the world. And it's a date on our calendars that we look forward to every 3 years, and I'm really blessed to have been involved in virtually all of the Volvos leading up to now.
And can you tell us, put you on the spot here a bit, but can you tell us perhaps what one of your favourite memories from the Whitbread or the Volvo Ocean Race has been? I mean, the start of the last edition, that's the only one I know, was pretty epic, watching them sort of fly out of Cape Town. But is there anything specific that you remember which has been a real special memory for you? That's
very easy. I've been fortunate enough to have sailed in the Pro-Am or practice race going back to Camper, Emirates Team New Zealand. And last year I was on board Team SCA in the Pro-Am, and we had 30 knots of breeze in the bay, and I asked Sam if there was any chance of me going up the rig up to the top spreader bars, and unbelievably she said sure, and I spent two beats across the bay and 30 knots of breeze up on the top spreader bar of Team SCA filming, and it was probably in 21 years of being a sports presenter and a sports broadcaster, that is my most unforgettable experience.
And how long have you spent following this edition of the Volvo Ocean Race? Did you track from when the teams first started out and were all announced through to them arriving here in Cape Town?
Pretty much. I've really keep track of the race from the time that they leave Cape Town right throughout, and I've sort of been keeping an eye on who the teams were, so I absolutely have been following it, and I'm happy to say that I have friends now on virtually all of the crews, so it's an amazing day for me to see a lot of old faces here and a lot of new. It's like a big family that you get to see once every 3 years.
And what do you think the fans enjoy most about the Volvo Ocean Race coming to Cape Town? Just off the coast here, or do you think it's the arrivals or the departures? I mean, what do you think that the people of Cape Town enjoy the most about the Volvo Ocean Race?
I think it's to be honest, I think it's the departures. The arrivals is a stage. Cape Townians are a little slow to on the uptake, so they sort of wake up after the arrivals, and unless it's an afternoon arrival like with Mafre today, then the import race starts to generate a lot of excitement. But by the time the departure comes, which is December the 10th, everyone in Cape Town's aware of what's happening, and as you know, Amy, there's so much emotion on dockside, on quayside for a departure. That would probably be the highlight for Cape Townians.
All right, Jeff, thank you. I'm going to let you get back to your job because you're probably going to light up your microphone now and start talking to the crowd, so I'll let you go. But thank you very much. Niall, back to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Amy. Well, Cape Town certainly has a lot in store for these sailors. Team Brunel now reversing into the dock. We saw the fenders go out. It's always agonising here for the friends and family, and us as well, the fans of the race in race headquarters, just waiting for these teams to get to the dock. But so much has to be done. The sails, the crew, the boat, all has to be put to bed just right, because 45,000 miles around the planet is going to show, and keeping your equipment in the best working form possible is certainly going to be a performance advantage here. Well, the city lit up behind Team Brunel as they are reversing in. The media is on the dock waiting to catch the team as they come in. If you have been following the arrivals earlier on today, we had Mafre winning the leg and receiving a very warm welcome indeed. Just behind them, Dongfeng race team taking second place. Could have very easily been a first. And then Vestas 11th Hour Racing in third. Now Team Brunel comes in fourth, but I really cannot stress this enough. There were points in this race where Team Brunel was on absolutely fine form in the lead. And even though in the last 2 days, if you've only just been dialing into the race in the last 48 hours, it looks like it's been pretty much a procession coming in here to Cape Town. It has been anything but. Team Brunel just a few boat lengths away now from docking, and I'm pretty sure we're going to see some satisfied sailors in the improvements that they've made from leg one.
I think so. There's enough experience on board that boat that they know that these kind of gains go little by little, that they have the experience and the maturity to say, okay, well, this is, maybe I'm just throwing this out there, but this is what I expect to see. That they'll say, okay, well, we're learning. We had great speed, as Niall, you were saying. They were a different boat in leg two than they were in leg one. They've got new rudders. we were looking at the manifest when the boats left Lisbon, and we noticed that they had changed all three rudders. They have two installed at one time, and then they have a spare, and they swapped them out for better class legal ones. And so clearly that has contributed to not only just the speed but also control. That it's not just a case of being fast. You need to be able to control the boat in all the conditions, and that gives confidence to the helm and to the crew.
And mentally as well. If something like that's bugging you, maybe you can't feel the vibration through your fingers, but it's almost like a phantom pain. It's there, you can feel it in the background. Changing that equipment out has maybe given that little bit of a confidence reset.
Yeah, I think so. And we've got incredibly sensitive, and I say that in absolutely the best sense of the word, and sensitive sailors on board. These are dinghy sailors that will sit for hours polishing 3 square meters of hull. Or the America's Cup, where you've got a team of 40, 50 people that are there to obsess over the finest, smallest detail. So those are the caliber of and level of detail of the people that are on board, and I think that we've heard Bauerbecken talking about what it's been like for him to be sailing with these Volvo Ocean Race rookies, the America's Cup sailors that have brought not only a breath of fresh air, but have been there to question the old way that they've been doing things, to see if there's not another way to squeeze some more speed out of this old boat that's been around the world once already. And I think that once they get the kinks out of this team, then they're going to be a real threat for the top 3, which is really well established. And so for me, they're not there yet, but they're getting closer.
Well, I cast my mind back to the last edition, where at this point, people weren't really talking about Team Brunel as we came into Cape Town, or maybe sort of 2 legs in. But Team Brunel, last edition, finished second, came in with a very strong second half. But now we can see Team Brunel coming into the round of applause from the friends and family on the dock. Bouwbrekking on the helm, just steering the boat backwards as it comes in. And the rest of the crew there just chucking out the mooring lines and getting everything put away. I mean, we've seen quite a slow docking in process for the teams here, but when you look at the boat now, you can see why. It's pretty neat, it's pretty tidy. They've got everything away out there. Now they can hit the dock and they can just get on with being reunited with everybody ashore and getting everything done so they can get off that boat quickly, because I'm sure they will be looking for a very well-deserved rest.
Well, it's a long race for the sailors, for the boat, but also for the shore crew. And so that's actually a nice gift that the sailors gave their shore crew. It's a nice sort of sign of respect. Bouwbekking standing there, sort of getting hold of his emotions, I guess, and figuring out what it's like to be back in Cape Town for what, the umpteenth time.
And I think he's looking remarkably good, actually. I mean, we saw Charles Cordrelia coming in earlier. He looked a little tired. He looked like somebody that's been weathering the storm. I mean, this boat looks in remarkable condition, and the crew are all smiling. Fantastic. Let's listen in now as Bouwbekking starts meeting some of his friends and family and the journalists here. Let's hear what the race veteran has got to say.
In Cape Town, albeit in the dead of the night.
Being Cape Town, so you know what you can expect. The southeasterly buster is in, and it's always an exciting finish.
Moving from 6th to 4th place, definite improvement. A good strong start over there. In fact, you were hunting for 2nd place.
Yeah, no, we're going really nicely. I think we improved hugely over leg 1, and we missed out a little bit when the breeze was up. We were just not fast enough, but I think we figured out why, and so that gives us good hopes for the next leg.
Good mix of skills on the boat as well. Some very experienced sailors in this race, and some rookies as well, especially in such a long leg. How did they fare?
Well, you better ask them. I was really happy with them, so I think they did a nice job. Their learning curve has been, I think, humongous, and above all, they're all healthy and fit, and I think they really enjoyed it.
Well, as we said, an improvement from 6th to 4th place, but all eyes on the next leg where there's an opportunity for double points.
Yeah, that will be a big one, and as well, we know leaving Cape Town is always a bit pain in the heart, but of course, then coming to Melbourne, if you end up the top of the table.
Well, welcome. A great crowd here, despite the time, and good to have you in.
Thank you very much.
Is it okay to do one for news? Do an interview for news? Yep. Excellent. We're still going there, Matt? Yep.
All right, I'm standing here with Peter Burling. Peter, nice to see you. Welcome to Cape Town. And from your point of view, your first crossing of the South Atlantic, how did it go?
Yeah, it was obviously an awesome league. It's a pretty quick one. Be at about 20 days. So no, we had a really good trip down. It was a bit of a shame we couldn't challenge a bit more for the lead, but I definitely think we made some pretty good improvements. Next league, but really happy with a bit of an uncivilized hour of the morning, but happy we're not still out there with the other guys. Just bit of an uncivilized hour of the morning, but happy we're not still out there with the other guys.
There's obviously been a lot of talk bandied around between yourself and Blair Tuke about the Triple Crown of sailing, and Blair obviously on Mapray, the first boat in, that livened things up a little bit, but still a long way to go.
Yeah, it's a long race, and for ourselves, it's definitely they've always been probably the favourite coming into it. But no, we're really happy with a lot of the things we improved on this leg, and we think we're in a lot better shape going forward. We've been together a pretty short time as a group, and feel like we've made some pretty big steps. But no, it's yeah, just looking forward to getting into the next leg and, you know, working on, you know, a fair few more things that we want to improve on, you know, over the next couple of weeks.
Nice to see you here.
Happy scenes on the dock as Team Brunel pull into Cape Town for a 4th place in Leg 2. Mafre have taken the win. Dongfeng Race Team have taken 2nd place. Vestas 11th Hour Racing. Now, the points here with Vestas 11th Hour Racing finishing in 3rd, it does get a little bit interesting. There's bonus points and everything. When the Leg 2 is fully concluded, when the last 3 boats cross the finish line, we'll have the official scores up there. But right now, a lot of people are already starting to tweet some of the points, some of the more interesting things are happening. And, of course, it was alluded to there in that little interview with Bauer Becking. In fact, actually, these are sort of provisional points right now. This is what we've put together here so far, confirmation of where the team's finished. And, well, Conrad, talk us through 8, 6, 5, 4. A little bit of a different scoring structure to what some other people might be used to.
Exactly. There are 7 boats in the race, and so normally you win 7 points for winning the leg. However, just because we're the generous types of people, we've chucked in an extra bonus point for number 1. The principle behind that is that it leads to more sort of tactical risk taking, that it further emphasizes the value of taking the win rather than just scooping up points on the podium and getting 2nds and 3rds. So 8 for the Spanish boat, 6 for the Chinese, and then the Charlie Enright picking up 5, and finally the veteran Bauer Becking picking up 4th place this time round. And so in terms of the overall rankings, that puts Mafre on top, and followed by Dongfeng and Vestas 11th Hour Racing. Yep. So Vestas in 2nd place.
Yeah, and I think this is where it's going to get very interesting, isn't it? Because we can bring you a provisional overalls that we're having built at the moment. But of course, bear in mind that we've still got a lot more scores to come. There's still 3 boats out in the water. These are provisional. There's no reason we think why these numbers might be wrong, but unfortunately we're not quite given the permission to give you our opinion as stated fact. But this is how we see it at the moment. Mafre will be on 14 points. Vestas 11th Hour Racing will be in 2nd place on 13. Dongfeng Race Team in 3rd place on 11 points, 2 points behind. Team Brunel, then we start to see a little bit of a points difference. They're down on 6th. I mean, bear in mind, they had a weak finish in the first leg, a reasonable finish in this one. So that points differential there is sort of understandable. However, the point we're really trying to make here is going into the next leg, it's going to be double points through the Southern Ocean. So the points and the scores are certainly close enough to see some major changes in the weeks ahead. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because actually leg 2 is not over, and there is a major battle raging on the water right now. We have 3 teams, Axon Nobel, Sun Hunkai Scallywag and Turn the Tide on Plastic, all neck and neck. And I mean, just how close is that final pack at the moment?
Well, you say it's 3 boats. The whole theme is 3. We've got 3 boats in 3 miles, and it's incredible. And continuing with the theme, 330 odd miles until the finish. So there we go. Wrap that up, put a bow on top. Incredibly tight sailing. You can see Turn the Tide on Plastic there with the highest speed. It looks like Axon Nobel struggling a little bit in the beginning. They are just starting to edge their way into an anticyclone, and so we're really not sure exactly when they're going to be arriving tomorrow.
We're not 100% certain, but we will be there to bring you the arrivals and the conclusion of leg 2. At the moment, it's looking like it's going to be in the wee hours of tomorrow morning. If you're following the race via the Race Experts feed on Twitter, they will let you know, as they do us. If you are following the race on Facebook, you'll get a notification. And if you've got the Volvo Ocean Race app and you allow it to notify you via your phone, that's probably the best way. Every time we will go live, your phone will let you know. We will see you in about 24 hours as leg 2 sees the incredible tight battle between the final 3 boats get concluded on the finish line in Cape Town.
You won't bring me, you won't